The air backstage at the Eurovision Song Contest crackled with a nervous energy that was almost palpable. A whirlwind of activities swirled around the Mystery Inc. gang as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, dodging frantic stage hands, lugging elaborate sets and technicians wrestling with recalcitrant microphones. Costumes shimmered under the harsh glare of work lights, a kaleidoscope of sequins, feathers and vibrant colours that clashed and blended in a dazzling display of pre-performance chaos. The aroma of sweat, hairspray and anticipation hung heavy in the air, a potent cocktail that even Shaggy, usually overwhelmed by the prospect of a buffet, found slightly overwhelming. "Roo-roo!" Scooby-Doo whimpered, his tail tucked low as a particularly aggressive lighting technician nearly bowled him over. He'd already managed to snag a half-eaten sausage roll from a discarded catering tray, but the chaotic energy had him feeling decidedly less ravenous. "Okay, gang," Fred, ever the resourceful leader, consulted a hastily drawn map of the backstage area. "Velma, you're on security footage. Daphne, you're with me checking the staging. Shaggy, Scooby, you're on smell duty. Let's see if we can sniff out anything unusual." "Right, Fred, let's get to work." Daphne, ever the picture of elegance even amidst the chaos, adjusted her scarf and offered a reassuring smile. Velma, meanwhile, was already immersed in the security monitor, her brow furrowed in concentration. The footage showed a series of minor malfunctions, flickering lights, mysteriously tripped circuit breakers, and even a rogue spotlight that seemed to have a mind of its own. She noticed a pattern in the malfunctions, all of them occurring near the Eurovision crystal trophy, a magnificent piece of shimmering glass that sat proudly on a pedestal near the main stage. "This is odd," Velma murmured, tapping her fingers on the console. "These glitches aren't random. They seem to be concentrated in specific areas and correlated with periods of heightened activity. There's something unusual about this crystal. I can feel it." Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, tasked with the less glamorous but equally important role of olfactory investigation, began their patrol. Shaggy, his stomach rumbling in protest, was less than thrilled about the task, though the prospect of discovering something deliciously mysterious provided a degree of motivation. Scooby-Doo, on the other hand, was in his element, his nose twitching as he sniffed out the peculiar aroma emanating from the crystal. "Like it's shimmering, Shaggy," Scooby-Doo whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "And it smells like old music and sparkly things." Wow, Scooby, it does smell weird, like a mix of vintage perfume, old vinyl records, and... Is that Swedish meatballs?" Shaggy, ever the cautious one, inhaled cautiously. The thought of meatballs sent a shiver of excitement down Shaggy's spine, but this was quickly replaced by a rising feeling of unease as they noticed a subtle but unmistakable shimmering emanating from the crystal. It pulsed with a faint ethereal glow that seemed to ripple outwards, distorting the air around it. This was no ordinary trophy. This was something magical. As the band, ABBA, began their sound check of Waterloo, the energy surrounding the crystal intensified. The air thickened, the shimmering glow became more pronounced, and a chilling gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing a few nearby lamps. The music, vibrant and confident, seemed to react to this surge of energy, the notes swelling and expanding in a strange and disconcerting way. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being subtly warped by the crystal's power. Suddenly, a translucent figure materialized from the shimmering glow, its form wavering slightly as it solidified. It was a ghostly rendition of a Eurovision contestant from a bygone era, a woman in a shimmering silver gown, her expression one of mingled bewilderment and distress. She floated across the room, her ghostly voice echoing through the hall, lamenting about a lost victory and a missed opportunity to claim the Eurovision trophy. Before anyone could react, more ghostly figures began to emerge from the crystal, each a spectral representation of a past Eurovision performer, their ethereal forms flickering and shimmering. They were a ghostly chorus of singers from across the decades, their spectral voices weaving a dissonant and haunting melody that blended seamlessly with the still-playing Waterloo. Panic erupted. Stagehands screamed and scattered, technicians dropped their tools, and the air was filled with the cacophony of ghostly wails and frantic shouts. Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, in a perfect display of synchronized terror, dove behind a stack of discarded stage props, their eyes wide with a mixture of fright and fascination. "Like Zoinks, Scoob!" Shaggy gasped. "Ghostly Eurovision singers? This is worse than that time we encountered the Phantom of the Opera at the community theatre." ABBA, in the midst of their sound check, stopped abruptly, their faces etched with a mixture of surprise and concern. Agnetha, ever the graceful one, stared in disbelief at the swirling mists and ghostly apparitions, while Frida looked genuinely worried. Benny and Bjorn seemed determined to understand what was happening, exchanging knowing looks and hushed whispers that revealed their determination to get to the bottom of this strange phenomenon. Their music, strangely, seemed to affect the spectral singers. Their haunting wails momentarily stilled as they listened to the vibrant melody of Waterloo. It was a moment of uneasy peace that felt like a fragile pause before the storm. The Eurovision crystal, pulsing with an increasingly intense light, remained at the center of this eerie spectacle, its strange properties clearly tied to the supernatural events unfolding around it. The investigation had just begun, and it was already promising to be a most unusual case for Mystery Inc. The shimmering glow emanating from the Eurovision crystal intensified as the opening chords of ABBA's Waterloo filled the backstage area. The air crackled with an almost tangible energy, a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension hanging heavy in the air. Even the usually unflappable Bjorn seemed slightly on edge, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on his guitar case. Agnetha, meanwhile, hummed softly along to the intro, her eyes scanning the room with a curious intensity. Suddenly the air shimmered again, but this time the effect wasn't subtle. A translucent figure materialized near the sound-mixing console, its form swirling and wavering like heat rising from asphalt on a summer's day. It was a ghostly woman, clad in a shimmering sequined gown that looked remarkably like something from a 1970s Eurovision performance. Her face was pale, almost ethereal, and her expression a mixture of bewilderment and indignation. She looked utterly out of place amongst the modern tech and bustling stagehands. Before anyone could even gasp, the ghostly woman began to sing, not Waterloo, but a mournful, slightly off-key ballad in a language none of the present-day crew could understand. Her voice, thin and reedy, drifted across the room, fading slightly as if she were remembering a tune long forgotten. Then, as if to emphasize her lament, she let out a small, almost plaintive wail, causing a nearby spotlight to flicker and die. "Ruro," Scooby-Doo whimpered, his nose twitching more from fright than from the smell of anything tasty. He dove behind Shaggy, who promptly yelped and tripped over a discarded microphone cable. "Like a ghost, Scoob! A singing ghost!" Shaggy cried, his voice a mixture of terror and disbelief. "And she's off-key." More ghostly figures began to materialize, swirling from the crystal's intensifying glow. Each apparition seemed to be a spectral echo of a past Eurovision contestant, their costumes ranging from flamboyant bell-bottoms and enormous platform shoes to what appeared to be a Viking helmet and a surprisingly modern-looking catsuit. They floated about the room like confused butterflies, their translucent bodies shimmering and flickering, their ethereal voices creating a strangely harmonious yet discordant chorus of various Eurovision songs past. One ghost, a portly man in a lime green jumpsuit, seemed particularly agitated. He floated around, flapping his arms wildly, muttering about stolen points and a rigged voting system. Another, a woman in a rather fetching but incredibly dated hat, seemed solely concerned with finding a lost feather boa. The chaos escalated. Technicians screamed and dropped their equipment, scattering in every direction. Stagehands collided, tripping over each other, in their haste to escape the eerie spectacle. The air filled with a mixture of ghostly wails, panicked shouts, and the frantic beeping of malfunctioning equipment. ABBA, momentarily stunned, exchanged baffled glances before Benny started to tap out a frantic rhythm on his keyboard, trying to decipher the strange musical elements woven into the spectral chorus. "Everyone calm down!" Daphne called out, her voice surprisingly clear amidst the pandemonium. "Fred, Velma, let's try to get a clearer picture of what's going on here." Fred, meanwhile, was trying to avoid being bumped into by a ghostly contestant in a rather fetching, though exceedingly transparent, tutu. He attempted to make a plan but found his strategic thinking severely hampered by the fact that a spectral singer in a giant afro was currently attempting to use his notepad as a makeshift tambourine. Velma, ever the scientific mind, observed the scene with a keen eye. She noted that the malfunctions seemed to directly correlate with the location of the spectral singers. "Velma, VO. It's the crystal," she announced, her voice tight with urgency. "Velma, VO. These ghosts are somehow connected to its energy. They're probably drawing power from the music, which is why they seem to be amplified during ABBA's rehearsal." Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, meanwhile, had found a relatively safe hiding spot behind a pile of inflatable bananas. Their fear, however, was momentarily overshadowed by a different kind of concern, when one of the spectral singers accidentally dropped a half-eaten bag of what looked suspiciously like Swedish meatballs near their hiding place. Scooby's nose twitched. The ghostly meatballs smelled surprisingly delicious. Scooby-Doo stammered, his fear momentarily forgotten in the face of potential gustatory delight. "Like meatballs, Shaggy, ghostly meatballs!" Shaggy, though still terrified, couldn't help but feel a pang of hunger. "Like Scoob," he whispered, eyeing the ghostly meatballs with a mixture of fear and desire. "Maybe we can, sample one. Just a tiny bite. For research purposes, of course." As the ghostly Eurovision performers continued their spectral serenade, a chilling gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing a few more lights and causing several of the ghosts to momentarily disperse before reforming again, their ethereal voices weaving a new, slightly more discordant tune. The Eurovision crystal pulsed with an increasingly intense light, its magical power clearly at play. The ghostly chorus, seemingly drawn to ABBA's music, seemed to be mimicking the melody of Waterloo, although their ghostly additions turned the happy tune into something more akin to a haunting dirge. It was clear that this wasn't just a simple case of spooky apparitions. This was a full-blown supernatural Eurovision extravaganza, and Mystery Inc. was right in the middle of it. The adventure had only just begun, and the gang knew that only their combined skills and courage could solve this uniquely spectral mystery. And perhaps, just perhaps, a taste of those ghostly meatballs wouldn't hurt either.